Beijing, the capital of China. At the heart of this modern metropolis stands an ancient palace. It is so enormous, it is a city unto itself. Its very name inspires awe and fear, the Forbidden City. 250 acres of sequestered splendor, 800 buildings, 10,000 rooms. For 500 years, it served as home to 2 dynasties and 24 emperors. It was forbidden to all except them and the members of their court. Even today, some chambers remain strictly off-limits. The secret world which thrived here remains an enigma to this day.
The Forbidden City captures the imagination because of the mysteries enveloping it. What we don't know about life as it was lived by the emperors, the concubines, the eunuchs, it must have been spectacular.
It was, I suppose, our version of Hollywood, New York City, Palm Beach, and Howard Hughes rolled into one.
What secrets lie behind these forbidding walls? What clandestine tales of intrigue, murder, and mayhem have taken place here? Anyone caught trespassing to probe these ancient mysteries faced an unspeakable death. Pass through the portals of time where death once awaited as we unlock the elusive secrets of the Forbidden City. December 3rd, 1908. A 2-year-old boy woke to find himself the all-powerful ruler of 300 million subjects. Even at his tender age, his authority was absolute. His name was Puyi, the last emperor of China. Surrounding him was the grandeur of the Forbidden City. In a child's eyes, it was an overwhelming pageant of sparkle and color.
Whenever I think of my childhood, my head fills with a yellow mist. Everything was yellow. This color was used exclusively by the imperial household and made me feel that I had a heavenly nature, different from that of everybody else. Puyi, the last emperor of China.
The Forbidden City, as Puyi knew it, is gone forever. The people of China, barred from its gates for 500 years, are now welcome here. They seek answers to the same baffling questions asked by their ancestors. What happened within these walls? Are ancient rumors of unrivaled passion and perversity true? Where is the treasure said to have vanished from the palace storehouses? Is there truth to the legend that the last ruling family to live here was doomed by a curse? For 5 centuries, the Forbidden City remained as unknown to the outside world as the most distant star. The only certainty, indescribable power resided here.
I think both Chinese and Western scholars and the average tourist are fascinated with the Forbidden City because it's hard for us to imagine so much power concentrated in one single place. I think we're also fascinated because of all the things we don't know. And I think both Chinese and Western scholars, and the average tourist, are fascinated with the Forbidden City because it's hard for us to imagine so much power concentrated in one single place. I think we're also fascinated because of all the things we don't know. And so the imagination can weave mysteries around the palace life.
And we will see here the famous Hall of Supreme Harmony. That's where the emperor, each emperor acceded.
Today, the curious can freely explore here, but not so long ago, to tread here was to invite death. Even so, the lure of the unknown was too strong for some to resist. One intruder's fate became a dire warning to all who dared follow. The trespasser, an unemployed cook, his plan to kill the emperor. Unseen by palace guards, he breached the wall. He was awed by the palatial wonders he beheld. With stealth and luck, he maneuvered to within a few feet of his target. But before his sword could strike home, the emperor's sentinels subdued him.
When asked to give an account of himself, he was somewhat incoherent, but he talked about the frustrations of living in poverty, right outside all of the splendor of the Forbidden City. At that point, they said, well, if you were frustrated, why didn't you commit suicide? Why did you enter into the sacred precincts? And he said, well, what good would it do to commit suicide? I could go down in history if I managed to breach the walls of the Forbidden City.
As with all intruders, the cook was condemned to death. The standard form of execution, a barbaric nightmare aptly called the death by 1,000 cuts.
The idea was to take small scoops of flesh, one by one, from the body, leaving the internal organs functioning for as long as possible, so that the person would be conscious of each and every slice.
Why was the penalty for intrusion so severe? The answer may lie in that the Forbidden City was believed to be unspeakably sacred. As the home of the emperors, it could be nothing less. To the people of Imperial China, their emperors were divine beings, the sons of heaven. They were the cosmic pivots in which the divine and mankind became one. The Chinese believed that their palace home was the center of all things.
It's the navel of the Chinese world. This is where the cosmos centers itself by dint of having the Son of Heaven in there. And much of that aura still resides there. When you see the Forbidden City, you see Chinese emperors, you see imperial power.
The visual impact of the Forbidden City lies partly in its enormity. Its majestic focal point is the Hall of Supreme Harmony. "45 minutes before dawn, the emperor ascended the steps to his majestic throne. As the seat of immeasurable power, this spot marked the nucleus of the Forbidden City. Here, with a nod of his head, the emperor directed the destiny of millions. To enjoy serenity, he retreated to the Jinlung Garden. This pavilion served as a favorite haven for the emperor and his guests. Cups of wine floated along this channel. Wherever a cup stopped, tradition obliged the nearest person to compose a poem. If a poem displeased the emperor, the punishment was to drink all the wine in one swallow. In the hall of mental cultivation, the emperor retired to his bedchamber. On his order, a concubine was brought before him. But even here, the emperor's private life was not entirely his own. A eunuch servant was always near. Every act of the emperor, even lovemaking, was a matter of official record.
We know how the eunuchs would carry the concubine for the night in and deposit her with the emperor, and then record very carefully the length of sexual intercourse, how many times, all of these for a historical record that's been kept.
Such historical records are a key tool for modern scholars. Slowly, the Forbidden City is beginning to yield its secrets. How did it all begin? Who conceived and built the Forbidden City? The Forbidden City is the largest palace complex in the world. It is a unique blend of the stately and the serene. Who created this majestic city? According to legend, it was conceived in one man's unforgettable dream. The man was a 14th century Buddhist monk. His name is unknown. One night he experienced a dream of such clarity, he was unsure he had even been asleep. In his dream, he stared into a strange darkness that suddenly filled with blinding beauty. Before his eyes was a glorious city. The vision seared itself into the monk's memory. Near the end of the turn of the 15th century, it is said, the monk passed word of his dream to one of China's most notorious figures. His name was Yung Lo, his apt nickname, the Black Dragon. He was a cruel yet brilliant prince, burning with ambition, who plotted to seize the throne. Obsessed by the monk's dream, Yung Lo set out on a daring mission to realize it. In 1402, Yung Lo and his rebel warriors stormed China's capital, Nanjing. They overpowered the imperial army and forced the emperor to flee. The Black Dragon brazenly declared himself the new emperor of China. His first priority was to construct the monk's shining city. But did such a monk actually exist? Could a more mundane explanation lie at the heart of Yung Lo's obsession?
In order to draw attention away from the fact that he was not a legitimate successor, he had to engage in spectacular projects of all sorts in order to persuade the Chinese populace that he was, in fact, a legitimate ruler.
Could the Forbidden City have been Yung Lo's strategy to win the recognition he craved? His first order of business was to select a construction site. He chose Beijing and declared it the new capital. In 1404, Yung Lo began to marshal the manpower and resources he required. Not since the construction of the Great Wall 1,600 years earlier had China witnessed such a monumental endeavor.
The raw materials for the building of the city were scattered all over China. It was one of the most mammoth projects that the Chinese state ever undertook. The logistics of this effort must have been spectacular.
500,000 workmen toiled 15 years realizing Yung Lo's dream. They manufactured 100 million bricks, 200 million tiles. far-flung jungles of Sichuan supplied the finest timbers. Transported by river, trees took as long as 4 years to reach Beijing. The quarries in the distant hills supplied the finest marbles. The largest single piece is this carved walkway. 50 feet long and 10 feet wide, it weighs 200 tons. It is so vast, Yunglow's workers had to transport it here in winter, sliding it along a natural highway of ice. Elsewhere around the globe at this time, other cultures were immersed in their own monumental efforts. In Portugal, seafarers were sailing off to explore the coast of West Africa. In Peru, the Inca were fitting huge stone blocks together with exacting detail. And in Nigeria, artisans of the Edo Kingdom were perfecting the art of bronze casting. In 1424, the Forbidden City was nearly completed. In Yunglow's eyes, it possessed a transcendent beauty worthy of the Son of Heaven. But in a bitter irony, the Black Dragon never entered the finished palace. Just before its completion, he ventured to Mongolia on a military expedition. He died there, never to behold his masterwork in its full glory. 6 centuries later, that glory still radiates. The Forbidden City endures as the fulfillment of the prophetic vision of one man and a monument to the driving energy of another. The architects who designed it are said to have imbued it with magical powers. In Beijing today, architects look to the Forbidden City for inspiration. Though it is 6 centuries old, in one sense it is regarded as a model of modern design. It is the crowning achievement of a time-honored art called feng shui. Feng shui is the art of imbuing architecture with spiritual harmony. In China today, most people would never dream of buying a home without first consulting a feng shui master. They are said to radiate with a mystical energy called qi.
In China, we need to remember that everything is animate. Everything is composed of qi. So things that we think of as inanimate objects, such as a table or a rock, a river stream, may in fact be pulsing with qi.
The concept of qi has dominated the thoughts of ancient architects for centuries. Their challenge? To build structures in which this crucial energy would flow most harmoniously. If qi is channeled effectively, they believed, it will have a positive effect on the people who live or work there. "600 years ago, the Forbidden City presented feng shui masters their greatest challenge. Could they design a palace with a harmony worthy of the sons of heaven? Their lofty goal compelled them to remold the entire landscape.
According to feng shui, the ideal geomantic site has mountains at the back, and Beijing is very flat. It's at the northern end of the North China Plain. What they had to do was construct a mountain at the back of the imperial palace, and they did that, and that's called Coal Hill.
The looming grandeur of Coal Hill ensured that positive qi energy could not escape the Forbidden City. Much of that energy is said to flow in the man-made Golden River. Its waters were designed to flow gently so that the qi could never escape its banks. Every nuance of design here reflects a profound concern with channeling invisible cosmic forces. The Forbidden City endures as feng shui's masterpiece. But the harmonious forces of nature imbued here are fragile. They are easily disrupted by human strife. On one historic day in 1644, utter chaos reigned here. By sunset, the mighty Ming dynasty would crumble. The disaster was the result of the Ming Emperor's self-indulgence. For 200 years, they financed their lavish lifestyle by imposing crushing taxes. Inevitably, China's impoverished masses rose up in protest. Beijing exploded in turmoil, and a massive rebel force marched toward the Forbidden City.
When word of that came back to the emperor, he realized the end had come. As he sat and reflected on this, he began to drink, and he began to drink more heavily, until finally, intoxicated, he decided he would kill his women in order to keep them from the lecherous hands of the rebel. He tried to do so, but couldn't succeed. He actually cut off the arm of one of his daughters.
Though crazed by panic, the emperor gathered his senses long enough to write a final message.
My virtue is small, and therefore I have incurred the wrath of heaven. Zhongchen, the last emperor of the Ming dynasty.
As insurgents breached the palace gates, the emperor scaled Coal Hill, also known as Prospect Hill, to survey the full scope of the disaster.
It's an interesting irony because on ritual occasions, the emperors would always climb Prospect Hill in order to survey the kingdom and sort of appreciate the peace and wealth of the people. But on this occasion, the emperor climbed Prospect Hill really to see the capital city falling to the rebels and seeing the end of the Ming regime.
On this spot, the despondent emperor hung himself. With his death, a mighty dynasty came to an end. But the Forbidden City would live on as the seat of power for another, the Qing. Even so, the Qing emperors are said to have lived in fear of a curse uttered just before their reign began. In 1912, as we will see, that curse may have brought down the Qing regime. But until that fateful day, these walls would shield countless tales of mayhem and perversity. The key players, the castrated eunuch servants. For 500 years, peasants peering up at these towering walls posed questions which persist to this day. What was happening in the Forbidden City? What exotic secrets were being shielded from their view? Until recent decades, the people of China knew nothing more than who dwelt here. The emperors, their concubines, and their eunuch servants. But now, scholars are piecing together the incredible facts. The fairest among the players in this secret drama were the concubines. Their sole purpose was to provide the emperor unbridled bliss. Unmatched luxury awaited any girl inducted into the harem. Every 3 years, hundreds of candidates presented themselves to the imperial household.
Interestingly enough, it was often the palace women rather than the emperor who evaluated concubines and decided who would become a concubine. According to one story, for example, they would often sleep overnight with a concubine to determine not only their beauty, but also whether they snored at night, and whether that would interfere with the emperor's sleep.
Having won a place in the Forbidden City, a concubine was pampered beyond her dreams. But for many, the palace became a prison. When her youth and beauty faded, she was doomed to a life of loneliness. Having shared the bed of the Son of Heaven, she could never be touched by another man. Here, in the garden of dispossessed favorites, she strolled aimlessly, her only pastime to count the hours, days, and years till death granted freedom. But the story of one concubine reveals even the youngest and most fair would often meet with tragedy. Against her will, she entered the Forbidden City in 1746. She was the prize of a military invasion in Central Asia. Her name is lost to history, but she wore a perfume so seductive it gave her renown as the fragrant concubine. When the Emperor Qianlong first laid eyes upon her, he instantly fell under her spell. The fragrant concubine, however, refused to submit to his advances. This merely increased the Emperor's passion, but it ignited the rage of his mother, the Empress Dowager.
He tried to seduce her in many ways, but she never yielded. Eventually, because of her stubbornness, the Empress Dowager obliged her to either yield or die.
The fragrant concubine courageously stood her ground. The Empress Dowager ordered her execution. The Emperor rushed to save her, but he was too late. He found her body hanging from a rafter by a silken cord. Accounts are unclear as to what happened next, but some believe the heartbroken emperor buried her in a secret site in the Forbidden City. Does the fragrant concubine lie somewhere beneath the palace grounds? The secret of the grave's location would have been entrusted to the Forbidden City's most shadowy figures, the eunuchs. They serve as harem watchdogs, menials, and spies. Over the centuries, they become indispensable. As many as 3,000 populate the palace at one time.
The extent and size of the eunuch establishment, I suppose, is probably the most astounding factor when you think about the way the palace was operated. And there was actually a flourishing industry in castration to make it possible for men to to have their sexual organs removed and then go to work in the palace.
Thousands, lured by the mystique of the Forbidden City, flocked to Beijing's castration clinic. There they submitted to a harrowing surgery. In this way only could their fidelity to the emperor be ensured.
Apparently, the young man was made to smoke opium as an anesthetic, and then he was seated on a chair with a hole, and finally the testicles would be cut off by the surgeon in one stroke of a sharp knife. Now, very few people survived that operation. In fact, only 50% survived the operation, owing to shock or hemorrhage or infection and so forth.
Why would any man risk such an agonizing death, only to spend the rest of his life as a mutilated servant?
Becoming a eunuch was a way of obtaining power and wealth. You sort of castrated your way to the top, so to speak. Some of the eunuchs reaped considerable rewards from their positions at the court. Some became the wealthiest, among the wealthiest individuals in China.
The amount of riches eunuchs could seize was limited only by their ambition and cunning. Their incessant schemes made the Forbidden City a crucible of conspiracy and intrigue. Could the eunuchs be responsible for one of the most notorious thefts of this century? In 1923, a disastrous fire of unknown origin swept through the imperial storehouses. Thousands of priceless treasures were lost. Gold statuettes, exquisite handcrafted furnishings, silk robes worn by the emperors themselves. But was their disappearance due to fire or theft? Accusations rose that the eunuchs deliberately set the blaze. Their motive? To destroy evidence that they had been pilfering the storehouses for 50 years. Did the eunuchs commit a wanton act of arson? If so, what became of the priceless treasures they had stolen?
There were fragments of it carried away, taken to points in Europe, and now in the United States, some in Japan, a lot in Taiwan. Some of it went to the bottom of the sea in ships that sank attempting to take the treasures away. It's very difficult to be able to reconstruct how large this treasure was, what it might have been worth, what it even contained.
The enormity of the eunuch's crime is impossible to calculate. The notorious dimension they lend the Forbidden City remains a key part of its enduring mystique. The secret world which thrived here would last for 5 centuries. But early in the 20th century, it crumbled into obscurity. What brought about this tragic end? In 1644, China witnessed the dawn of a new era. Command of the empire passed to a new ruling family. They called their dynasty Cheng, and like the Ming emperors before them, they wielded their power behind the walls of the Forbidden City. Their reign extended to the 20th century. But they were destined to meet a tragic end. Legend holds their demise was the result of a 300-year-old curse. The curse was uttered in 1619. At that time, The tribes of Manchuria, soon to form the Qing regime, were embroiled in war. Their enemy, a tribe called the Yehe, led by a daring warrior, Prince Jin Jiasu.
When they attacked this neighboring prince, he refused to come down from his protected tower, and they set it on fire. And while the flames were leaping around him, he is said to have shouted down the curse, "Your house will fall because of the house of Yehe."
The prince specified that the instrument of his curse would be a woman of his tribe. Was this an idle threat or a genuine prophecy of doom? The Manchu emperors of the Qing dynasty chose not to tempt fate. For 200 years, they deliberately took no concubines from the Yehe tribe. Their caution was rewarded. Their dynasty flourished. But in 1853, the memory of the curse appeared to fade. A 17-year-old Yehe girl was allowed to enter the imperial harem. Her name was Su Shi. Beneath her innocuous exterior was a ruthless woman of greed and cunning. 3 years after she arrived in the Forbidden City, she began to gain the power she craved. One key achievement made it all possible. Su Shi bore the emperor his only son.
From that position of strength, giving birth and continuing the family line, she had herself moved up to become the principal empress through a variety of ploys, intrigue, deceit.
With an unmatched gift for political maneuvering, Su Shi became the most powerful figure in China. For the next 50 years, she enforced her will through child rulers who were nothing more than her puppets.
Women were not supposed to rule in China. So Cixi Taiho had to rule always with the fiction that she was simply acting as regent until the boy emperors were fully competent to assume the reins of power.
All that mattered to Su Shi was her own power and pleasure. Her extravagance convinced many that the curse was taking effect. Under her rule, China suffered a steady and disastrous decline. By 1908, anarchy and revolution swept the land. On her deathbed, Su Shi had one final chance to save the empire by naming a worthy successor to the throne. But she chose her 2-year-old nephew, Pu Yi, in a vain attempt to retain her power. 4 years later, the empire collapsed. Was this the result of China's inability to cope with the sweeping changes of a modern world? Or was it the fulfillment of a sinister curse? Whatever the case, the Forbidden City's centuries of glory were over. But one last tragic act was still to play itself out. The leading character, Pu Yi, the last emperor. At 7, he was forced to abdicate, but was allowed to live in the Forbidden City until 1925. At 19, he sought exile in Manchuria. In the 1930s, he was forced by invading Japanese forces to act as the ruler of their puppet government. In 1945, he was captured by the Russian army and imprisoned in Siberia. 15 years later, he was pardoned and allowed to return to Beijing. The man, once regarded as a living god, ended his days as a humble gardener. He died in obscurity in 1967. His former home, and home to 23 emperors before him, has been open to the public since 1949. The Chinese, barred from its gates for 500 years, revel in exploring its majesty. But even now, some chambers in the imperial city are strictly forbidden. Inside dwell Communist China's most powerful heads of state.
I remember the first time in Peking in the early 70s, walking down the street outside, not even knowing where I was in Beijing, and seeing this gate heavily guarded, and going up with all the temerity of a foreigner and saying, "What's in here?" And the guard looking at me and saying, "The chairman lives here." And I was just completely thrilled in my own way by that.
From Chairman Mao Zedong to Deng Xiaoping, the Forbidden City has remained a nucleus of inaccessible power. This legacy of restriction seems not to dampen the Chinese people's fascination with the Forbidden City. They embrace it as a symbol of their rich heritage.
Paradoxically enough, the people today in the People's Republic of China take great pride in the Forbidden City. Here is an area that was taboo, that they couldn't enter in traditional times, but it's an area that is beautiful, it's spectacular, and shows what the Chinese people can do. And so it contributes greatly to nationalism among the Chinese and to a feeling of self-pride and self-worth.
Their object of pride has endured for 5 centuries. Sadly, however, the Forbidden City's days now appear to be numbered. The causes? Heavy tourist traffic, Beijing's thick pollution, and inadequate resources to restore it.
I was very struck by my own experience when I was working in China, because each day was just part of the job of maintenance men to brush up the little pieces of the Forbidden City that had fallen off during the night, and sweep them up and throw them away. The future of the Forbidden City as an architectural treasure is uncertain at best.
Even if the Forbidden City were to someday cease to be, its mystery will endure. Its gates may be open, but its secrets persist. What bizarre incidents of intrigue remain unknown? What incredible secrets did the emperors, eunuchs, and concubines take to their graves? The answers are beyond our grasp, lost to the winds of history. In this sense, the Forbidden City forbids us still.